Episode 5, How to Prepare for Interviews If You're a Recent Graduate. This is a bonus episode. How do you prepare for the interview process? Let's assume this is your first real job, and in preparing for the interview process, you need to illustrate where you've assumed responsibility. So this might include things that you can reference like student activities, extracurricular groups, where you've held a responsibility associated with your hobbies or your interest groups, athletic or even nonprofit activities. How do you demonstrate responsibility? Well, if you're in your first type of interview for your first type of real job, one thing you want to do is show ownership. You want to be able to speak to good and bad learning experiences, showing humility associated with failure and success, and what your experience taught you in terms of how you've developed yourself moving forward. So for my son, for example, he's 17 years old and he's working right now on his Eagle Scout project. This is really teaching him how to do business planning, and he's learning some tough lessons. Some good things are that he's learning the process. Some bad things are he's noticed he needs to work on his communications being more precise or more timely. These are things he can refer to in an interview process, citing experience he's had even as a 17-year-old to position his value. So showing ownership, also setting standards. You want to describe how you have set expectations so other people on your team can follow and understand what needs to be done. Going back to the Eagle Scout reference, he is doing an entire project where he is depending on a team to help him execute this project. Setting standards for communication on how he's going to do what needs to be done and do it profitably, that's the scope of the business case study that he's working on. How have you set standards? How have you led people, even in small nonprofit efforts or community efforts? How have you set standards and helped get things done? How do you lead? Where do you lead? Have you volunteered for leadership? And have you supported leadership positions? Where have you created measurable value? In thinking about all of your childhood experience or your high school experience leading into college or your college experience, where in that experience have you offered innovation? Where have you created efficiencies or new ideas for process improvement? These things create measurable value for the organization or the group that you've worked with. Really take some time to think about it, because I'm sure there are ways in which you've added value that you don't even realize. When you're interviewing for your first opportunity, remember that it begins with the first handshake, with your first personal impression, and with your eye contact. All of these things make a big difference. Your goal in the interviews is to understand from each person the scope of work that needs to be done and how it needs to be done profitably. You need to tailor questions specific to each person or department that you meet with. When a company hires you, what are their expectations of you? What should yours be? Next up is a framework of understandings that should guide your focus on priorities associated with the work that needs to be done. If you're a recent graduate, your job one is to understand the work that needs to be done. You need to get measurably proficient at the work you're hired to do. You need to take ownership of the work that you're hired to do and set a standard of excellence by constantly improving the quality and excellence of what you do. Try to standardize it so that your boss can almost predict at any time of the day what you're doing and what your outcome will be. When you meet with your boss and with people on your team, take notes, pay attention to details, and ask questions, such as, where is this file? Where do I find this template? I often find as a consultant, when I go meet with companies and I'm in with a new client, often there'll be people sitting in the meeting who are getting the same information I am. I'm taking down detailed notes, they're not. At the end of the meeting, you can't Google what the boss said, so be sure to take detailed notes. You need to do your work at a basic level of proficiency, and that's what you need to focus on. Let's take a deeper dive into your basic job one. In every business environment, there are systems, technologies, and processes. Your number one priority is to get measurably proficient at the work that you are hired to do. Too often, new hires get distracted. A typical assignment of a new hire is do whatever the person who hires you says to do. They want you to take ownership of the process that you're asked to do. They want you to add value wherever you can. You need to do this by becoming the expert of the process, setting the standards, constantly improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the process that you're doing. To the degree that you can create templates, files, and define processes, you can then improve them. In my line of work, often we would use a little acronym called CODE, that we used to help standardize the processes within the ad agency that I worked for. CODE stands for how do we communicate with our customer? What kind of template response are we using to manage expectations? How are we communicating internally with the team? Once we've set expectations with the customer, how do we set expectations with the team so that we deliver? How do we organize our time so that we deliver on our promises? How do we organize our resources? How do we document our process so that we know where we're at any point in time and people can look at how efficiently we're using our time and resources? And how do we evaluate our progress? How do we codify or communicate, organize, document, and evaluate every step of how we do, why we do, what we do? In a big organization, these systems might be well documented and you're asked to train and follow the established protocols. In a small business, you might be asked to actually create these protocols. Either way, you can add value and efficiency by getting to be very efficient at the process you're being asked to do. Keep in mind that as you think about things, leadership is situational, and you're being hired to act like and think like a leader. So when you see a small opportunity and you're new on the team, take the lead. I encourage you to be proactive. Look for things on your manager's plate that you can take off his plate and present yourself as a flexible resource to that person. Also share. This sounds like something basic, but you'd be amazed how many people, once they get in a position, hoard information. They don't openly share it with other people. I encourage you to publish your notes from a meeting, do pre-work for meetings, publish the to-do list coming out of meetings. Any way you can help other people become more efficient makes you very valuable. Also standardize, and small companies help formalize the systems and document the processes. Follow. Leadership is about responsibility and taking ownership, but the mature leaders, those are the people who advise on strategies. You need to prove yourself in small ways to the people who lead you. Until you master what needs to be done, you cannot advise on what should be done. Do what nobody else wants to do. Nothing should be beneath you as an excellent leader. Humility makes you stand out. I'd like to tell you, I know people who have made an entire career in contract work by going into corporations and looking for the type of work that nobody wants to do. They make themselves indispensable and they have a never-ending contract because they're willing to do the kinds of work that other people want to pass on. Is that you? You could make yourself indispensable that way. Take on additional responsibilities. Look for things nobody wants to do. Things like timesheets, administration of permissions to the systems, and other types of tedious works. This can make you very indispensable. Do things that need to be done without being asked. Attitudes that you might encounter from other people is, this is the way we always have done it and with good reasons why. You need to understand the why of the way things have always been done. You need to act in respectful ways to others, demonstrating your detailed knowledge, taking on small things, building trust, and always demonstrating respect. Now, social media tells us that our voice and our opinions are always welcome. But I want to remind you that in a business setting, that's not true. In work situations, there's a time and a place for feedback and sharing suggestions. As a new member to the team, you need to be very sensitive to your role and the timeliness of your suggestions. Your suggestions are just not always welcome and not always want to be heard by your team. Until you establish yourself and establish your reputation, and even once you do establish your reputation, you need to be very careful with how you share suggestions or critiques of the existing systems. This is just wise. Finally, know your place and give things time. You're going from a student to an employee, and it's not easy. Why is that? Well, number one, the rules change. What it takes for you to be a successful student is very different. And in fact, it's the diametric almost opposite to what it takes to be effective on a team. So as a student, you're taught it's about you. You need to focus on what makes you happy and successful. You need to be competitive. You need to be focused. When you come out and you join a team, it's all about the team. when you go to work, how well you work with others, how well you find your place and your value on the team. You're moving from one environment that's extremely focused on you to another environment that's just the opposite. It's focused on everyone else. That can be hard. Also, distractions. Managing distractions at work is critical. You need to turn off the alerts on your phone, put down your phone, and stop engaging with anything at work that's not your primary job. Shopping, social media, weekend planning, these things are just not to be done at work. And if your boss catches you, you might get a warning, but you might not. So take it very seriously. There's a time for work, and then there's a time for your phone, and doing phone stuff at work is not a good mix. Also, share what you know. Don't hoard information. Share your skills and information with others. Your value will increase proportionate to your willingness to share and invest with other people. Document your contributions and ask about success measures. At the interview, an initial interview, ask about KPIs or key performance indicators. These are things that indicate to your team and report your progress in ways that are measurable. What does your 30, 60, and 90-day plan need to look like? What will your job review or your performance review look like? What does a career path look like within the company? So what kinds of skills do they want you to develop to be promotional within that company and its culture? These are all appropriate questions to ask as you're getting your feet wet and moving forward in your first job. Keep in mind that everything you do at that first job creates a footprint. Remember that your documentation that you're doing for that first job becomes the case studies that you might use to interview on your next job. Be careful about confidential information, but always create detailed case studies so that you remember your accomplishments as you go from opportunity to opportunity. Thank you so much for joining us in this module. There's a tremendous amount to think about in this module. I encourage you to download the worksheets off of economyofone.com, Module 7. That should get you up to speed on all of the details we've just discussed. Sign up for our weekly newsletter. We are doing incredible things nationally, and we would love to connect with you. I would love personally to just get to know you on a prayer or a group call. I'd like to get you into a small group, and I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. Also, I encourage you to connect with us on Facebook, Economy of One private group. We're doing great things there. Please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment for me. I'd love to know about your situation and how this information has helped you or additional questions that you might have. Thank you so much. And next up will be negotiations. Module 8, we could have written an entire book on this, but this is just an incredible chapter coming up that will help you prepare to negotiate the best possible deal for you.